Welcome to episode 4 of In My Hometown, a conversation about race. My name is Michael Kelly. Thanks so very much for having us. Tonight, you're going to hear from one of the best panels we've ever assembled about how we can use sports to create change around racial injustices. And we thought we had one heck of a panel when the week began. And then we got word that legendary high school football coach Larry Favre would be joining us. And as you can imagine, that just made us all the more excited. We will get to the panelists in a second, but first, just a couple thoughts on the genesis of this platform. We created this broadcast with the hope that it would lead to dialogue and it would lead to understanding. Because the unfortunate reality is people live in bubbles, and too often they're unwilling to venture outside of those bubbles, unwilling to engage, unwilling to listen to the perspectives of people who do not look like them. Consider the fact that a 2014 study showed 75% of white people said they do not have any non-white friends. This platform was a way to burst those bubbles in the hopes that we would see real change around racial inequality in our communities. And what we asked of our panelists was not easy: to open up old wounds, to be raw, to be vulnerable. And they've done that. Not to change your mind, but to simply allow you to see things from a different perspective. And that's what we're going to try to do tonight, and certainly in the episodes to come. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelist. He's the pride of Salmon High, a McDonald's High School All-American, a national championship winner at Duke, and a 9-year NBA veteran. Chris Duhon, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. We've made it a point to say we are not subject matter experts. That changes tonight. Tiffany Aidoo, a North Shore High grad, played basketball at Tulane, now works for the Laureus Foundation, an organization founded by Nelson Mandela that focuses on social justice and sports. Tiffany, good to see you.
You too. Thank you for having me as well.
He is without a doubt one of the best men I know, a man who has given so much to his players throughout his years of coaching. He led the Fountain Blue Bulldogs to the semifinals in the 2004 Louisiana High School football playoffs, and now serves as the head coach at Slidell High. Larry Favre. Coach, it's a pleasure to see you.
Michael, thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. It's great to be here.
And finally, he's one of the top high school prospects in the state of Louisiana, star running back at Fountain Blue High, and might I add, recent Tulane commit, Iverson Celestine. Thanks for joining us, man. Good to see you.
How y'all doing? Thanks for having me.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that today is Iverson's 18th birthday. That should tell you something about this young man. So Iverson, from all of us on the broadcast, everybody watching at home, happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, let's dive in. Chris, first question goes to you. Next Tuesday will mark 3 months since the murder of George Floyd. Let's start with this. What stood out to you about what we've seen during this time?
You know, I hate to see that it takes the murder of a young black man, for, people to kind of want to listen, and that's kind of the frustrating part. Colin Kaepernick took, quite a beating for what he, when he knelt for the national anthem a couple of years ago, trying to point out these certain things. And again, it took someone else to lose their lives for people to kind of realize. And the main thing is that we're looking for conversation and understanding and empathy. And I think that, with professional sports, they've done an amazing job of trying to keep that awareness open. You've seen actors and, comedians and everybody else now that are also doing the same thing as well. Because usually when these things happen, in about 3-4 months, it kind of dies down. But I think the professional sports, especially the NBA, has done a great job of keeping that conversation open, keeping people aware of what's going on in communities around the world. And, hopefully we could keep this momentum going and see change.
Tiffany, you're the daughter of immigrant parents who came to the States from Ghana. I got to wonder, what was your experience as a young black woman growing up in Slidell?
Yeah, I just want to actually allude to what Chris just mentioned around this idea of understanding and empathy. I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to really value in this conversation. And so when I think about my experience as first generation born in the Deep South, it was difficult. And so what sport actually did for me, it created a community for me to connect. And I was able to learn. And in all honesty, I speak as, one of the members of the Aidoo family, and this is my experience. But my experience is that, I feel like there was a bridging the gap of different cultures, but in bridging the gap of different cultures and going to practice and learning about my teammates, which again, growing up in the Deep South and particularly Slidell, it was very, very white. I had to adapt. I had to lose my ways. I think, I was talking to you, Michael, as we were preparing for this conversation, that one of the things that I was completely embarrassed about was my name, my middle name, my last name. I never took ownership over that. On top of it, I lost my way in terms of culture and eating and the way that I presented myself. And so there was a point in time that I was eating with my hands, which is a very traditional African thing to do, eating with my hands probably until junior high. And then I was completely embarrassed by it. So I had to stop that. And then on top of it, when I think about the conversations I was having with my friend, and this is the thing that we cannot do a disservice to young people who are playing sport, is that we are experiencing things that we do not understand or recognize. It's taken me many years to unpack that. And so when I think about unpacking that, I think about a moment where I stood in the street inside of Louisiana talking to a friend who was sitting on her bike and told her, I wish that I was white. And I didn't know what I was saying at that moment, probably up until now. And that moment, I think there was a complete disregard to my race, my gender, growing up in a white community, and also having parents with just big, beautiful personalities. It was really difficult. But I can say that sport created a sanctuary for me to express myself in my most authentic way. And I think that's going to be the beauty of this conversation, is to think about that, but also really challenge people to understand what it was like for us outside of the closed corners of the field and the court itself.
Coach, you have 3 decades of experience in Southeast Louisiana, but you were born in Virginia. How did your upbringing shape your desire to be an ally to the Black community?
Well, as Tiffany and Chris said, it's all about empathy and understanding and taking time to understand others and the plight of others. And Michael, I was very fortunate. I came up in the 60s in a much different time, and when civil rights was at the very forefront of our country. And I was born in Arlington, Virginia, directly across the Potomac River from the nation's capital. And I was born in 1962. In 1963, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the young minister from Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. King, got up and spoke. And I'm not going to tell you that as a 1-year-old child, I remember Dr. King's speech. I do remember the scenery. I remember the crowd, the people that always stood out. But certainly as a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, Dr. King's words just resonated through me, and they meant so much to me. And when we know in education, there's the first 4, 5, 6 years of your life that what those experiences, what really form your life and who you are. And to hear Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech had a profound impact on me. And I have a dream that we will live in a country where we're all brothers, Black, white, different religious backgrounds. And I have a dream that my children will live in a country, grow up in a country where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. That, as a kid, that's just a no-brainer. It makes so much sense. You have no anger, you have no political beliefs, you have no discrimination, you have no prejudice. You're just a young child. And so I was so blessed for those words to have that impact on me that has carried me to today. And then the other thing is, growing up, is in the schools, there was this thing on the walls, and it said real simple: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? The golden rule. It was in the schools. You saw it. Treat people the exact same way that you want to be treated. And so those were very, that they shaped a young man. They shaped his life. They shaped his views. They shaped his opinions. And, Dr. King was my hero. And I've tried to live that life ever since. And one other thing is, in my hometown of Fredericksburg, Virginia, a young 16-year-old high school student desegregated our hometown. She desegregated the counters in our hometown in 1960, the movie theaters in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Her name was Gail Todd. Well, she was our 8th grade science teacher for our community in our hometown. So she changed her name to Miss Adag Balola. We called her Miss A. But that was our teacher. She was a leader in our hometown and still is to this day. So those are profound experiences on a young man and a young child, and they've shaped me and my thoughts and my beliefs to this day.
Well, and you've certainly brought that to the fields and to your players and the way that you coach. It's really incredible to watch. Iverson, let's go to you now. You, as we mentioned, you're the young gun of the group here. You're kind of the next generation. And when we've talked off camera, you've told me you have not experienced a lot of racism. And if I'm being optimistic, maybe that's a testament to the younger generations and really just the progressive views that we're now starting to see. What do you attribute that to?
I attribute it to my parents most of all, mainly because they showed to me when I was younger, and my dad never really let me roam freely. He was more of a disciplinarian. So I didn't run into many discrimination problems or racial issues. But I also fell in love with what I'm doing as far as playing football very young. So I kind of kept myself out the way. I started training when I was 9 years old. So my head was in the gym, in the books. So I never really had time to really get in trouble or come in situations where I had to deal with anything that's, a racial issue. But what I can say is that I've definitely seen racism, for example. Kids out here in my neighborhood, I live in a black neighborhood, and they love to ride fools around here all the time, just having fun. And 15 minutes into them riding, you'll see 15 cop cars coming and threatening them to put them up, or they're gonna take them. But when I'm at my non-black friend's house, in their neighborhoods, we do the same exact thing, having fun. You'll never get one cop car, one complaint, and you're basically free to do whatever. It's just the small things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffany and Chris, you played collegiately at predominantly white institutions. Chris, you notably played ball at Duke under Mike Krzyzewski. Tiffany, you started at Tulane. And again, Iverson, as we mentioned at the start of the broadcast, you recently committed to Tulane, so you're going to get to see Tiffany a lot moving forward. I'd be interested to know what your experience was like, and did you have to deal with direct or indirect prejudices or injustices? Tiffany, I want to start with you on that.
Interesting space to attend for school. I can say for me, it wasn't as a shocking transition to go from Slidell to Tulane, but it was a shocking transition in terms of the socioeconomic status of most of the students who attended there. And so I will never forget sitting in one of my classes, I believe it was my junior year, and it was a media studies class. So we were talking about all these things happening in the media, and sports was one of those topics. And this white male in our class had made a comment about student athletes taking general study classes and, trying to find the easy route so they can participate in their sport. And knowing me, I was not going to let him say that in a class when I think 2 other of my teammates were in there. I was like, aren't you in the same class as me? And I was just so confused and complex by this idea and this narrative that they constantly have out there about student athletes. We work every day when we're on campus to get our scholarship. We have to travel. We have to go to class. We have to wake up at 5 a.m. We don't go to bed till 11 p.m. And we do that all over again, 6-7 days a week, if you're putting in the extra work. And so to me, in hearing this narrative, it's just so profound that not only is it happening on the students' behalf, but it's a systemic issue that we face as student athletes, or I faced as a student athlete. And I say that because we have to have a piece of paper before we start each semester and go and show our professors that we're going to be missing this many days of school. And, can we take your class? It's asking for permission to take a class that we want to take, but yet you have, and specifically thinking about Tulane, you have students with tons of money that they get to go out and party at the boot. If you're familiar with Tulane and that corner store and that corner place that people go to, you go party at the boot. And then you may or may not show up to class the next day, but then you feel that a student athlete who is waking up every day to go to work for their sport and to go to class for an education is irresponsible and can't make it to class or put in the extra work to do a class that they want to do. So I'm telling these anecdotal stories so people can understand the essence of what systemic issues look like in a system, especially a PWI or predominantly white institution, and how difficult it is for a Black student to be educated in a space where you're thought less than of, if I'm saying that right, but you're basically less than any other athlete, and you're also assumed to be an athlete if you're a Black student on the campus.
Chris, we know the power of Duke basketball. We know everything that comes with putting on that jersey. Did the fact that you were a member of that squad, did it shield you from the injustices that Tiffany discussed, or did you have to deal with it as well?
No, I mean, I agree, and I went through pretty much the same thing that Tiffany was just talking about. Did it show me a little bit? Yeah, because Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday nights, they're coming into Cameron Indoor Stadium and cheering us on. But when it got to the classroom, you're just the dumb jock in there, or you're only there at Duke University, for basketball, which, it could be true. I made good grades in high school, but, obviously getting to a prestigious university like Duke, basketball obviously wasn't an ally for me to get there. But like Tiffany mentioned, that, we had to put in the work, just as much as every other student, as far as, getting our studies in. We did the same thing Tiffany was talking about, where we brought our schedule in and what days we're going to miss. So they knew we were going to be out those days. And if we weren't in those days, they had someone they can contact. So education was very high on our list, at Duke. But, when you're walking around and you're not wearing a Duke basketball T-shirt, is a completely different story. And, just living through those things and understanding them, it's tough. It's difficult. It's tough and difficult for you to always feel that people are looking down on you just because they don't think you're educated enough, or you're only here because you could play basketball. And, that's a tough thing that you have to live with on pretty much any campus as an athlete, as a student athlete.
There's a Dr. King quote that's been on my mind recently. He said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." Coach, you studied Dr. King. As you said, he was one of the great heroes to you, and you have been anything but silent. In fact, we talked with some of your former athletes dating back to your days at Fountain Blue High, and they told us even back then, 15, 20 years ago, you were willing to have conversations with your team around racial equality. Why was that so important to you?
Well, coaches are teachers. And, I take pride in being a transformational coach. I don't just coach skills. I don't just coach football. I don't just teach kids how to run with the ball or catch. We use football to prepare young people for life. And there's so many issues that they learn from life. I started at O'Perry Walker High School, 1989. I was there 10 years. I was the white coach in a predominantly Black school. And you know what? During the 90s, though, that was Rodney King. 1991 was Rodney King. And I was right on the front line. I was in the bricks at Algiers. And those kids, they were angry. And they had a right to be angry. And we needed to discuss that. And I needed to understand. I needed to understand what they were feeling. And that was important. In 1992, we had a young man shot in the back of the head, 8:30 in the morning on school campus. I was the first adult on the scene. New Orleans then was the murder capital of the country. And we were on the front lines. We had to discuss that. We had to explain that. I was there during the O.J. Simpson verdict. And so there was tremendous amount of emotions. And so we had to bring those to the forefront and talk, because we prepare kids for life. I want to teach kids to be able to go into life and make their own opinion and make their own judgments. And just as Dr. King said, to judge people for who they are and how they treat you, and not some predetermined or some bias. And so it's always been important. In 2000, I go to Fountain Blue. It's a totally different school. It's the opposite. It's a predominantly white school. And there it was, I had a beat on one end, Lacombe on the other. And we had to bring those kids together. That topic was the N-word. And we had to bring that out in the open. That was unacceptable. That's a curse word to me. I've never used that word ever in my life, and I won't stand for anyone to use that word around me. And of course, always on Dr. King's holiday, the Friday before the holiday, I tell the same story I told tonight. The impact that Dr. King had on me, his historical importance to our country and to our people. And so it's so important that we use this platform. And I think all coaches who are transformational coaches do that. That they want to use that platform to improve lives and to leave that imprint. And so that's so important to me. And now at Slidell, we haven't had through COVID, we haven't had our whole team together yet this year. We've only had pods of 25 or less at a time. COVID has really been overwhelming to us. But when we can get together as a team, we will discuss what's going on in our country right now, because it's important that everyone be heard and that we understand everyone's sympathies. And as I said before, it's good for me so I can continue to grow and learn and understand so that we can all be on the same page.
Coach, I want to ask a quick follow-up, because one of your former players, Jared Narcisse, jumped in and was talking about the conversation that you had prior to the state semifinals against West Monroe. And again, it's a different beast when you're going up to Northern Louisiana in some parts. Can you kind of walk me through what those conversations were like?
Well, you get off the bus and there's rebel flags everywhere and stars and bars, and they use that to intimidate you, and they use that to degrade you, and the words coming at our children from the stands to put them down because of the color of their skin. And I let them know we're going to fight tonight. We're going to stand up for who we are and what we stand for. And that was an experience to get off that bus and walk into that scene. And many of our kids, as Iverson has explained, they hadn't experienced that in Mandeville. They hadn't experienced that at Fontainebleau High School. And it was a rude awakening for us. And Coach Favre was a little bit upset. And we used it we didn't win the game, but we made sure people understood who we were and why we were there.
And such a great lesson for your players, right? You may not have won the game from a box score standpoint, but the lessons that they learned from you during that trip had to be invaluable. Tiffany, I want to dive in a little bit into your role with Laureus because you do such great work and the organization does such great work. I wonder, though, how much that work has changed for both you and the organization over the last few months in regards to racial inequality.
Yeah, before I answer that question, I wanted to respond to something that Coach said just around this idea of being a transformational coach. I think that's one of the most incredible things that I can hear come from a coach, right now and just in general. And the reason I say that is because in hearing how you're teaching life skills and teaching athletes to be more than just their sport is the most important thing you can do. And I say that because I think that there's this narrative, and I constantly talk about narratives because that is something that shapes and defines an individual, especially if it's something that's extremely dominant in the culture that we exist in. And so when I think about the narrative of being a transformational coach and what sport looks like now, most athletes or most Black and brown children aspire to go into entertainment or they aspire to go into sport. And so to be able to introduce just some foundational opportunities outside of what sport can look like, but how you can really harness what you learn through sport to become a better individual. And I think this even goes back to what Chris was saying about being in the classroom and just thinking about how, we're sitting in the classrooms and people think that we're less than and that we can't perform well, that impacts what we do in our professional spaces. When we feel that we can't perform in all white spaces, that hinders us. We become, I call it the imposter syndrome, or we have the stereotype threat because we have to become this thing that we're not. And we bring unique experiences and we are unique. And so when you think about a team, not every individual on the team has the same skill set. You have role players and then you got the superstars. You need all of that in order for people to win, to be successful. And so that is the same way that we should exist in the society that we live in, but it's not that way. So I just wanted to say that first. And then to answer your question, Michael, you know, I'm very fortunate to work for a foundation that was founded by Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela founded this work because of the racial tension in South Africa, because of apartheid. And so I'm very, very, very honored to be able to say that we have actually been working more in our mission and our vision than we ever have because of what's going on through COVID and because of the disparities that are growing even larger because of COVID. But I can say the thing that's the downfall is that there's a lack of funding that is rolling into these spaces because there are so many other things that we have to be concerned about, which is definitely that should be the case. There are people losing jobs and healthcare and all of these things. But what's really saddening me, I'm not really good with my words right now, but what's really sad to me is the fact that these organizations are losing out on funding, which is then not able to support the young people that need the spaces to participate in sport the most. And then on top of that, that will then impact their mental health and the connection that they have. On top of that, most organizations are the ones that have to fill the gaps and the disparities. And so with that being said, and without these organizations being able to do the work that they need to do to support and bring our community together, we're losing out on opportunities to close this disparity gap that existed before the pandemic. So kind of what Chris alluded to with George Floyd and the fact that there's an outrage of him being killed on camera, it's the same thing for these organizations. These organizations have been doing the work and now they have to do the work that much harder with less resources. So that's a little bit about, you know, I think what's going on with the foundation that I get the opportunity to work for every day.
Well, and the work becomes more important than maybe it's ever been before for you, which is just, you talk about the power of what you're doing and the need for more of it and the need for more funding. It's crucial, absolutely crucial right now. We talk about the separation of church and state. More recently, there seems to be a desire from some people for a separation of sports and politics or sports and race. You pick what you want to use. Chris, how do you grapple with the critics who just want athletes to, and I'm going to quote here, shut up and dribble?
Well, I mean, it just goes to what we've been talking about already. You know, what, you know, Tiffany and I have experienced in college, and, you know, it just goes to that professional level to where, you know, we're not viewed as being intelligent. We're not viewed as being able to do things other than play a professional sport. And, you know, when the crazy thing is politics is all around all around professional sports. I mean, you know, when you win a championship, you go see the president. You know, they come to your games, they come to the national championships games or the Super Bowl or wherever it may be. So, you know, whenever we speak up of issues like that, you know, there's a sense that we're not qualified to do that because only thing we should be able to do is play a professional sport. And, you know, that's kind of the injustices that, you know, we've been going through, you know, or I can say I've gone throughout my whole career. And, you know, when you do hear someone speak up on it, one, you know, people are upset because it's taken away from their free time. If it's Colin Kaepernick kneeling from the national anthem, we don't want to hear that on a Sunday. I just want to watch football. Well, you know, that seems like a lame excuse for me, for someone that's crying out for help, crying out for their communities for help. And it just shows that, you know, when, you know, she made that comment, that, you know, it's just an ignorant comment because we're not viewed as intelligent or smart human beings. We're just viewed as athletes that just go out, perform, just go out and entertain us. And, you know, just shut up and do your job and be grateful for where you're at, you know, not understanding that we worked our butt off to get where we're at. So, you know, it's very frustrating, but I'm glad that we have a lot of guys at the tops, like, you know, LeBrons, who have not shut up and dribbled, have continued to keep these conversations going, continue to challenge those that are above us that do not want to hear us, but that, you know, we're going to keep talking and show that we're going to be heard, that change is going to happen. And, we just got to encourage, the younger guys to understand that and understand that, you're more than just an athlete. You're more than just an athlete, and that, you educate yourself and you should speak your mind at any time.
Chris, people are going to watch this broadcast and they're going to say, Chris, you're successful and you're famous and you make all this money and you're privileged. What do you know about racism? I say it because we've seen it in the comments from the interviews that we've done over the course of the week. I keep thinking back to the body cam footage we saw earlier, actually came out yesterday, of Raptors president Masai Ujiri being shoved at the NBA Finals by a white police officer while just trying to go on the court and celebrate an NBA championship with his team. And then the officer not only sues Ujiri, but then sues the Raptors and the NBA and all these baseless claims. And he was the instigator, not Ujiri. So to the critics, Chris, you say what?
I mean, again, it just goes to show you that, for Black people or minorities, there's a ceiling. If you look at the landscape, around, all professional sports, after being a player or even a coach, there's very few minorities that are owners, that are, presidents, that are GMs, or that are anything. So there's a ceiling. So there's a ceiling for minorities to win. No matter how successful you get, you're still not going to be able to get to that upper echelon where everybody else is at. And I think, that's a problem. That's something that obviously that needs to be changed. But, I can go back and tell an experience for myself. Like there's people with agendas. My second year in the league, I just bought my first car. I was living in Chicago, right by Cabrini Green, which is a projects in Chicago. It was torn down, but I was still kind of in that neighborhood. Literally turned the block, got pulled over by the police, guns out, everything out. I was, respectful, hand on the steering wheel, everything like that. Talking real crazy to me until I gave him my ID, went back and found out I played for the Bulls. And then everything changed after that. So, no matter how much money you have, you're still Black. You see all these famous athletes like OJ and Tiger Woods, when they get into trouble, they were Black and they were treated as Black. And, so no matter how much money you have, that's not going to change the skin color that I have. And I'm going to always be seen as beneath people.
And I got to think it makes you all the more fearful for the Black men and women who are not athletes, right? Like you got out of that situation because they found out who you are. The fear here becomes what happens if they don't find out you're an athlete, and what happens next? And that's something that has to be addressed. You talked about it a little bit earlier, Chris, and I want to bring Tiffany in on this. The Washington football team made news this week by making Jason Wright the first Black team president in the history of the NFL. Taking nothing away from Wright's qualifications for the job, but it shouldn't have taken that long. And it's Daniel Snyder and it's the Washington football team. I'm not going to go down that road tonight. But when you consider the fact that 70% of the NFL is made up of Black athletes, 70% of the WNBA is made up of Black athletes, and then that number jumps to 75% in the NBA. Tiffany, how do we create more opportunities for diverse leadership in coaching and the front offices?
Well, first, I just want people to recognize that tokenism is a thing. And tokenism means that when you select or when there's a Black person who's the first for anything, that you've done your job. That is not what this is about. It's about creating opportunity. And I'll go back to my previous comment of saying, like, when there's representation and you can see someone doing something who looks like you then think you can do it. And so when you grow up in spaces and see nothing but Black and brown people who are in sports and entertainment, that's all you think you can do. So every Black child is aspiring to do this thing, yet there's so many other opportunities, so many other ways you can become an entrepreneur and be creative. And so when I think about these spaces, the first thing that needs to happen is like there needs to be an internal dialogue, and there needs to be a reflection of what's going on with your implicit bias, meaning like the way that you think and the experiences that you have, you cannot project that onto other people. You need to change those ways, and you need to do some research and read some books and listen to some podcasts, whatever that is, because that's the foundational piece to even launch into the work. And so then you need to reflect on the people around you. And I'm going to continue to use my sports analogies and say that you can't have the same player on the team. Having the same player on the team is not going to win games. And we are living in a society where we all are thriving off each other. The pandemic is one thing that speaks to that. If someone gets infected, it does not judge by color, the color of your skin. You can get infected too. And so I think our country has been infected with this idea of racism, and we refuse to even look at it. So we're constantly having these same problems. So we need to look at who we're hiring for things. We need to look at who we're paying in terms of vendors. We need to look at, just how we're creating and building wealth in our communities. And until then, we're not going to be healthy as a society. And so I probably didn't allude to specifically how we change the diversity, but I really think before we even get into that conversation, we really need to think about our own position in all of this. And we also need to think about the position of our community and what that looks like in relation to what coaches look like, in relation to what owners look like, in relation to the policies that are made, because the policies are being made by the same people, which is not reflective of the community that they serve, which is harming the community that they serve. And so when you see things in media that is completely just destroying someone's name, like you're not giving them an opportunity to speak to who they are or to speak to their experiences. So it's out of frustration. So that's where I'll start, and I would love to hear from my peers on this panel to see what they think about it too.
Yeah, Coach, I'd be interested your thoughts on this. How do we create more diversity in coaching in the front offices?
Wow, what we're doing today is a great step. Opening up dialogue, getting people talking, raising awareness. It's so important. Certainly, the people are there, and they have to be identified. They have to be raised and fostered and to grow into. But they're there. They're there all across all sports, and it's frustrating. I know it's got to be frustrating that you only see on the field, but you don't see in the front office the representation of the players on the field. And it's something that we have to really talk about more. We need to bring to the attention. I know the Rooney family in the NFL has done an unbelievable job in Pittsburgh of being in the forefront, standing out that Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. But we don't see it across all other teams and other sports. And it's so important. But what we're doing tonight, Michael, what you're doing, what Tiffany, Chris have always stood for and who they are, passing it on to Iverson here tonight, excuse me. And this is the way. We need these dialogues. We have to open this awareness. We have to get people talking to take out those prejudices and the disbeliefs that this can't happen. So I think that tonight is a great step towards that, and we need to see it more on a national level in these leagues and in their meetings.
You talked about dialogue, Coach. That's certainly been a big theme for us over the course of the last 3 episodes. Education has been another big theme for us. Iverson, I want to bring you in on this. Your family has made it a point for you to read and watch and learn about racism in this country. And perhaps part of that is understanding that some history is left out of the textbooks. So I wonder, how have you grown as a person through that education?
I'm glad you asked that question, actually. Yeah, me and my dad have sat down and watched documentaries, and he's pointed it out to me, like, just from watching like stuff like Hidden Colors, the false information that school systems feeding like Columbus is the founder of America. That has to be the falsest fact ever. Like, how can you be the founder of a land that was already pre-claimed by had a whole other society, pre-existing society? Right? So that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to point out. And also in the textbooks, it's always African culture starting at slavery, as if we had no type of culture or we weren't existing before slavery. that we weren't kings and queens of Africa. And another thing that I'd show everybody that was left out is about how we, when the Moors went and helped take over Europe or whatever, and not Europe, not the Moors. What was it? Yeah, it was the Moors. It was the Moors that went over and helped take over Europe.
Sorry, we seem to be having a couple technical difficulties
I can't hear
here. Yeah, we seem to be having a couple technical difficulties with Iverson. We'll try to get him back in a second. Tiffany, I'd be interested from an education standpoint, where you are on this and the need to further these discussions through education and through understanding, and again, understanding that it's not all taught in the textbooks.
Yeah, I every day in my work, it's been interesting, and I'll share this, is that being in New Orleans or being in the Deep South, and also the unfortunate circumstances of Black men being killed on camera, Black women too, and our country rallying behind it in some sense to change that, I have had the opportunity to have a platform that I didn't have in speaking about this. And I say that because I live in New Orleans, and living in New Orleans, I think about just like the natural elements around me. And I think about the Mississippi River. I think about how that has been tied to slavery. So I actually want to touch on what I could hear from Iverson. It's like, I think about the deep rooted slavery and historical racism that we have embedded in our culture, and yet we refuse to hear and learn about it. And I'm going to actually step out and say something more just in regards to St. Tammany Parish. And we have to really look at the systems that exist currently, because if we refuse to look at the systems that exist currently for our students in that school system, we are doing a disservice to them by not acknowledging the lack of diversity. When I was at North Shore, or when I was at any school in Slidell, I didn't have very many teachers that looked like me. And I'm not saying that I have to have teachers that look like me in order for me to learn from them. You know, Coach is an example of that. Coach is understanding culture, and he's embedding himself in a way that to where he's learning about things outside of himself. That's what makes a team. That's what makes a community. So there's a lack of knowledge about who I am, where I come from. And because of that, I have to adapt or code switch to another culture and or society that doesn't fit my needs. And so it's just continuously oppressing people who look like me every day. And we need to have that education in order to grow. And we've been stagnant forever. And so I hope that this is an opportunity for us to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pose this to the entire panel. Chris, let's start with you. What are you seeing right now? And we talked a little bit about it, certainly at the start of the broadcast, but what are you seeing that makes you hopeful about what we've seen over the last 3 months, specifically around Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything that we've seen in terms of making real progress?
I mean, I just think that the word is out there. I think the momentum is still trending in the right direction. As I stated before, with the Colin Kaepernick situation, after about 3 or 4 months, then it kind of died down, and we didn't really revisit it or hear anything about it until this unfortunate tragedy of George Floyd. So I think again that a lot of professional sports have done a great job of keeping it out there, and it could get irritating, and people can get turned off by it, but it should not phase us. I mean, this is conversations that we need to have that are necessary if we really want to live under the umbrella of this is America. And and these are tough conversations. And I think the main thing is that, and I think that you need to get across is that we know things are not going to change tomorrow. They're probably not going to change in a year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it may be. But there needs to be a real big step in forward to having those changes. And it's going to take people to actually sit down and listen and hear the cries of the minority people. and literally try to do something. And that's going to take, obviously, it goes from the top, and hopefully, like I said, with the great job that a lot of people have done of still keeping this momentum going, that we will see change, and we'll see change soon.
Coach, how about you?
Well, this is this generation's 60s. It's their civil rights awakening. It's taking us to the next step. It's awakening a whole nother generation of young Americans of all colors. I have a 12-year-old daughter, Caroline, and we were home this summer with our family up in Virginia, and her and our friend Gabby Rosado. They drew us all into these two young people, a seventh grader and a young high school student, drew us, the adults, into a conversation about what's going on right now. And that I was so proud of these young ladies to see their social awareness and to see them to become influenced, and to that spark to light like it lit in me when I was young. And this is their, I was there in the 60s when as a child, and this is theirs. And it's what it's doing to the next generation to keep us growing, to keep us getting better, to keep awareness. And that's what you're seeing across the country. You're seeing people of all races coming together, and we continue to grow. And that's what I think has come from this.
Tiffany, how about you?
I was just, thinking about something, and I don't know if I'm going to answer the question, but I'll say it's been interesting what athletes are subjected to when it comes to their sport. And when I think about Tulane, I think about donors, and I think about post-athletic career and some of the things that I get to see on social media from some of those donors. And they're very racially charged, but yet they sit in the front seats of these games and they ask for autographs. And I don't think any athlete should be subjected to that. And if an athlete is subjected to that, I think an athlete should have the power and the platform to speak out against it. So I just wanted to share that. And I don't know if that actually answers the question. I don't know what that does for me as a Tulane alum who supports student athletes, but I'm always an advocate for athletes, and I always want to empower athletes, and I always want to support my university in becoming the best, as an alum, the best, place that anyone can attend. And, if we don't call these things out in real time, they become an issue. And that's one thing that I just want to share publicly and say that that's something that I have been subjected to in my adult life as a former athlete. And I think that's something that we should think about to ensure that current athletes are protected from that type of humiliation, because that's what it is.
Is there hope for you, though, Tiffany, about what we've seen, that this can be, as Coach talked about, like this is our generation's 60s? Do you feel that sense of hope at all, or is there a little more cynicism?
No, I think that there's a lot of hope. I honestly think, our media constructs this world to be extremely crazy. But when I see the people closest to me, when I see my Tulane family, a lot of people probably don't know this, but I was out here running in the streets and I ruptured my ankle trying to be a basketball player again. And they were on my side. They took care of me. And so I know that there's hope. I know that there's family. I know that there's people that care deeply about everybody on this panel and everybody beyond this panel that's probably watching. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a ton of hope. I just wish that we don't infect our society with all the negative drama that we see every day. And if we could stop doing that in some way, shape, or form, I think people can change their mindsets around what change looks like and be more open to it, for that matter.
Hey, Iverson, we got you back. Let's bring you in and see if that internet connection is better. What has you hopeful about what you've seen over the last couple months? It looks like Iverson's mic is muted. Hey, buddy, can you unmute your mic for us?
You hear me?
There we go. We got you now.
All right. What really gives me hope is just like being in the locker room with people from all different types of culture, just coming together, going to that brotherhood, that sense of love, and we just all together nation like that and be what live what the American dream is actually supposed to be. And, just like the way it's meant to do it. And I think everything will be fine. I think it's definitely getting better. Yeah.
Hey, Coach, I'm curious if your message to your players has changed over the years around racial injustice. Is there a greater sense of urgency for you given the movement and the protests in recent months? And also, let's be honest, you're not going to coach forever, so maybe there's a sense of urgency to reach these athletes now.
There's always that urgency. That urgency is always there. Certainly, like I said, these times now creates that conversation. We must have that conversation. But I just want to continue to prepare kids for what's coming. I tell kids all the time, the day you graduate from high school, that night of your graduation, right? It's one of the greatest nights in your life, balloons and family, and you have the project graduation, and it's this great night. But then the next morning you wake up and you're at the bottom of society. No experience, minimum education, no experience, and you got to start all over. And when you walk into that world, you're not going to walk into an all-white world. You're not going to walk into an all-black world. You're not going to walk into an all-Hispanic world. And you're going to have to be able to make it in that world. And so we want to continue to give kids those tools and prepare them for what that real world is. And then as things come in our society, as things come in our culture, as things come in our country, we have to continue to prepare them and help them, give them the skills so they can deal with those things, so they can make decisions on their own and not have people decide for them. And then love. We promote love in our family. At Slidell High, we promote love. The school colors, when I got here, the school colors of Slidell are green and white. But I had to think about that because that's not what our student body is. So now at Slidell, we're green with white, we're green with black, and we're green with gray. And so we want to just continue to do that. Certainly my time is winding down as a coach. This is year 31. But I just want to say that we always cared about children. We always put children first. And that when children left us, they left better for their time with us, not just as football players, but as humans and as members of society. And we want that to be the legacy.
Hey, Chris, how can we use sports as a catalyst for change? Because that's what this episode is. How do we use sports as this great unifier? Because we know that it is.
Well, I think Iverson made a great point is that, in sports, you're in a situation where you're with all different types of races, cultures, religions, and you're building that brotherhood, as he was speaking of, to go out and compete, obviously at a high level to win games. But you're spending so much time together with the practices and the trainings and the things like that, to where you have that opportunity to get to know one another. You get the opportunity to get to know how about different religions, about different countries, about different how people think differently, how they react to things differently. And the main thing about sports is that there's an essential bond that everyone has, because everyone is coming in with their mindset that they're playing for something that's bigger than them. So they're more willing to listen. They're more willing to compromise. They're more willing to listen to others and hear what they have to say. And we got to use that in our society. And as Coach, alluded to, once you graduate, you're going into a different world to where, is of all races, all different backgrounds, religion, and you have to be able to listen. That's what it all comes down to. Listen. That doesn't mean you always have to agree, but that means that you really have to listen. And again, have empathy for others and hoping that they get the same until where now you understand how that person feels. You see their situation, where they come from, how it takes. And now we can have a discussion about how to create change. But but sports shows that at the biggest platform, because in every professional sports, my experience, I had international players and white players and black players and Hispanic players, and during those whole time, I use it as a learning to understand different cultures and to understand, things that they've done and what's different than it is in America or whatever community that they grew up in. And I use that as a way of educating. And I think, if we as society kind of go with that same mindset, that we will have more empathy for everyone. And then we'll all strive to go and try to attack the same goal.
We've got Iverson back in now, and we've only got a couple minutes left on the broadcast. So I want to end with this. If you want people to take away one thing from tonight, what would that be, Tiffany?
Recently said to me, or it was said to me on an all-staff call with Glorious, and it stood out. And it stood out because it was coming from a board member who grew up in South Africa and had said that, it's actually more dangerous to not say anything at all, or to say to feel guilty about saying the wrong thing. And I think the best way for us to learn right now is to say how we feel, but say it with compassion, say it with empathy, and do it in a way that you want to truly understand and be open to that. So in this time of this, not in this time, but as we continue to work through this racial injustice, I think that's one of the things that you need to keep in mind.
Hey, Iverson, how about you? What do you want people to take away from tonight?
I want everyone to just always stand up for what you believe. Never hold back from expressing yourself, especially if it's for the better. Never doubt yourself because of how everybody else looks at you or how someone else you.
Oh, we had him there. We had him. I'll call AT&T for you, Iverson, tomorrow morning if you need me to. Coach, let's bring you in on this. What do you want people to take away from tonight?
Be accomplished when people empathize with each other, take the time to sit and listen and understand each other, that we can bridge these gaps. We can come together as one, as a human race, and that it's not that hard. It just takes people be willing to listen. As Chris said, I agree with so much with what he said. Take time to listen and to take time to understand that we don't all come from the same place, but that doesn't mean we all can't get to the same place. And how proud I am of you guys. Just you represent us so well, and how you're representing and how you are carrying this on for the next generation, and how proud I am of all of you and to be a part of you here tonight.
Coach, that's very kind of you. I can tell you from working on these last couple episodes, and certainly behind the scenes, this group, these moderators, these panelists, I mean, you can rattle off the list of names from Tyler Ammerman to Jordan Johnson to Shelby Johnson to Danielle Morvan. I mean, Chris Standifer, the list goes on and on and on. And when you say that, I think of those people because they are the ones who are creating great change. Jess Steckman, Brigitte Manuel. I'm going to run out of names at some point, but they are all so good at what they do and so committed to really creating change around racial inequality. Chris, bring us home tonight. What stood out to you?
One, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you guys for having me. I mean, I think this was awesome. The main thing is, one, we as a minority, we can't be looking for handouts. We have to do do our jobs and be responsible and educating ourselves. Let's educate ourselves. With the technology that they have now, with the internet and everything, let's do a better job of educating ourselves so we can be prepared to be in those positions of hierarchy, and also in those, and how I tried to do with my success is send the elevator down. If you're fortunate enough to have success in this world, send the elevator down so there's others that can come up and join you.
And look, I know from the number of years that you've done that basketball camp in Slidell, I know from the scholarships that you've done that you don't make any noise about, but you are the one that has given back to St. Tammany Parish time and time and time again. And I think that's why we wanted you on the broadcast, because we know how powerful your voice is, and we know what you have done and that you have never forgotten St. Tammany Parish, and we're grateful to you for that.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you guys for having me. It was a little difficult, talking with my former rivals at North Shore and Slidell and Fontainebleau, Salmon representing all day. But I mean, again, like you've done a great job of having a conversation, and for us to continue to have these conversations, I think it'll be great. And I think the best is yet to come.
Well, as soon as this broadcast is over, we'll jump off the air. We'll start having conversations about all the sporting events, and the rivalries can commence again. So, but at least for this hour, we were able to keep things fairly civilized. On behalf of everyone involved in this broadcast, thank you. The people behind the scenes who have done such incredible work. Megan Benfatti Browning, Jordan Johnson, who time and time again comes through. As we mentioned earlier, the moderators, the panelists who you've seen through the first 3 episodes. Not to worry, they will be back. We are doing more episodes. We are working with new voices and new faces and new perspectives. And we want to bring this to you. It is such an honor and a privilege to do this. On behalf of everyone here, my name is Michael Kelly. We'll see you down the road.